Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
Growing up as the heir to a legacy spanning generations, my life had always been mapped out for me. As a fourth-generation entrepreneur, I inherited not just wealth but the weight of expectations. My family's empire, valued at over $13 billion, was more than just a business, it was a dynasty. My father, Alexander Grant Thompson, had recently retired, passing the torch to me with a firm handshake and a solemn promise that I would uphold our family's legacy. I had every intention of doing so, and for a while, my life seemed to be nothing but boardrooms, profit margins, and relentless schedules. Then came the accident. It was a blur of screeching tires, shattering glass, and sudden jarring pain. I don't remember much, except the panic in the voices of strangers and the flashing lights of the ambulance. When I woke up in the hospital, my body was battered, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. Perhaps it was the shock of survival, or perhaps it was fate steering me toward something I didn't know I needed. That's when I met her Dr. Sofia Rivera. Sofia was nothing like the women I had met in my social circles. She was focused, confident, and utterly indifferent to my name or the fortune behind it. She treated me like any other patient, her demeanor professional, almost cold. I remember the first time she entered my room. Her calm presence filled the sterile space, her sharp eyes assessing me clinically. Her tone was brisk, "Mr. Thompson, you're lucky to be alive, but you need to follow instructions if you want to recover fully." No one had ever spoken to me like that before. I was used to deference, even flattery, but Sofia's straightforwardness intrigued me. Over the following weeks, as I underwent treatment and recovery, I found myself looking forward to our interactions. She would drop by to check on me, her white coat trailing behind her, clipboard in hand. Her focus was always on my medical progress, never on who I was outside the hospital walls. I admired her for it. At first, I tried to charm her. It was a reflex, really, a harmless comment here, a well-timed joke there. But Sofia was unmoved. She had a wall around her that I couldn't breach with money or status. It only made me want to try harder. It took time, but eventually, I saw glimpses of the person beneath the professional exterior. Sofia was kind, though she hid it well. She cared deeply about her patients and worked tirelessly to ensure they received the best care. One day, as we discussed my recovery plan, I caught her smiling at something I said. It was brief, but it was real. That moment gave me hope. I asked her out after I was discharged. To my surprise, she hesitated. "Mr. Thompson, I don't think it's appropriate," she said, her tone cautious. "Elliot," I corrected her. "Please call me Elliot, and it's just dinner. No expectations." She agreed reluctantly. That first dinner was a revelation. Sofia was brilliant, funny, and surprisingly warm once she let her guard down. She told me about her journey through medical school, her struggles as a new doctor, and her dreams of opening a clinic for underprivileged communities. Her passion for her work was contagious, and I found myself captivated by her in a way I hadn't experienced before. Our relationship wasn't easy at first. Sofia was wary, constantly questioning whether we came from two different worlds. But I was determined. For the first time in my life, I was chasing something, or rather someone, that felt real. It took over a year, but eventually, we stood side by side, exchanging vows in an intimate ceremony that felt worlds apart from the grandeur I was accustomed to. Sofia looked stunning in her simple wedding dress, her smile lighting up the room as I slipped the ring onto her finger. I knew she wasn't just my wife. She was my anchor, my partner, and my greatest adventure. When Sofia and I welcomed our daughter into the world 3 years after our marriage, it felt like life had come full circle. She was our miracle, a perfect blend of the woman I loved and everything good I aspired to be. Watching Sofia cradle our little girl, whom we named Isla, was one of the most beautiful sights I had ever seen. Sofia returned to work at the hospital not long after, balancing her role as a mother and a doctor with grace, or so I thought. For a while, life was good. I handled the family business, Sofia handled her patients, and we both cherished the moments we spent as a family. But slowly, something began to shift. Sofia started coming home later, distracted and distant even when she was physically present. I tried to give her space, thinking it was just the stress of her demanding job. After all, she had always been passionate about her work, and I respected that about her. Then one evening, I overheard her laughing on the phone, a laugh I hadn't heard in weeks. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, saying it was a colleague. It was an odd moment, but I let it go. I trusted Sophia. But the late nights became more frequent. Isla began asking why Mama wasn't home for dinner anymore, and the strain in our household grew heavier. It wasn't until I visited her at the hospital one afternoon, hoping to surprise her, that I saw him, Adrian Bennett. I recognized his name immediately. Adrian was the ex-boyfriend Sophia had told me about during our early days of dating, the one who had left her during medical school, breaking her heart when she needed him most. I had held her as she recounted those painful memories, promising her she deserved better. And now here he was, working as an administrator at her hospital, laughing with her like old times. I confronted Sophia that night. "Why didn't you tell me Adrian was working at the hospital?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. Her face froze, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it. But instead, she sighed. "It's not a big deal, Elliot. He's just a colleague now. The past is the past." "Is it?" I countered, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "Because lately, it feels like I'm competing with your job for your attention. And now, apparently, your ex-boyfriend too." Sophia's eyes flashed with anger. "That's ridiculous. You're being paranoid. Adrian means nothing to me. Then why does he seem to get more of your time than we do?" I shot back. "You're barely home, Sophia. Isla misses you." "I miss you." That struck a nerve. She turned defensive, accusing me of not understanding her work demands and how hard it was to balance everything. I tried to stay calm, but the words kept pouring out. How I felt like she was slipping away. How I'd seen her sharing smiles and conversations with a man who once broke her heart. "You told me everything about how he hurt you," I said, my voice softer now. "I know what you went through because of him. And yet, here we are. Do you not see how this looks? How this feels for me?" Sophia's expression softened for a moment, guilt flashing across her face, but it didn't last. "I can't control who works at the hospital, Elliot, and I can't put my career on hold every time you feel insecure." "Insecure?" I repeated, stunned. "This isn't about insecurity. It's about respect. For me, for our family, for the promises we made to each other." The argument escalated from there, both of us saying things we didn't mean, or maybe we did, but they came out wrong. By the end of it, Sophia stormed off to the bedroom, leaving me standing alone in the living room, my chest tight with frustration and hurt. That night, I sat in the nursery, rocking Isla to sleep. As I looked at her tiny, peaceful face, I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the life Sophia and I had dreamed of together. I loved her deeply, but for the first time, I felt a crack in the foundation of our marriage. Something had to change. Either we found a way to fix this, or the distance between us would only grow wider. And the thought of losing Sophia, of losing us, was a pain I wasn't sure I could bear. The silence between Sophia and me became its own kind of language, cold, distant, and heavy. Each day felt like a replay of the last, her late nights, hollow excuses, and the growing wedge between us. I kept hoping things would change, that Sophia would see how much her absence was affecting our family, but nothing did. One night, after another late dinner without her, I couldn't hold it in anymore. When she finally walked through the door, tired and indifferent, I decided it was time to have the conversation I'd been dreading. "Sophia," I began, keeping my voice steady. "We need to talk." "Can it wait, Elliot? I've had a long day," she said, brushing past me to drop her bag on the counter. "No, it can't wait," I said firmly. "This can't keep going on. You're barely home anymore. Isla is starting to notice, Sophia. She keeps asking why you're not here." Sophia turned, her eyes flashing with irritation. "I'm doing the best I can, Elliot. I have a demanding job, and you knew that when you married me. I didn't marry someone who would prioritize her ex-boyfriend and his problems over her own family." I shot back. That stopped her in her tracks. This again? She said, exasperated. Are we seriously doing this, Elliot? Adrian's wife is dead, and his son is struggling. What was I supposed to do? Ignore that. Yes, I said, my voice rising. You're not his wife, Sophia. You're not his family. That's not your responsibility. He doesn't have anyone else? She snapped, stepping closer. You don't understand, Elliot. Adrian is drowning, and his son needs stability. I'm just trying to help. And in doing so, you're abandoning your own family, I said, my tone sharp but controlled. Our daughter barely sees you. I barely see you. Do you think that's fair to us? To her? Sophia threw her hands up, frustration etched into every line of her face. This isn't about you, Elliot. This is about doing the right thing. No, Sophia, I said, my voice dropping. This is about you refusing to set boundaries. Adrian is not your problem. He made his choices and now he has to deal with them. You're not his safety net. Her expression hardened. You're heartless, she spat. How can you stand there and say that when there's a child involved? I'm not heartless, I countered. I'm practical. That child has a father. Adrian needs to step up and take care of his son, not rely on you to fill the gaps. Sophia crossed her arms, her eyes blazing. Maybe if you had a shred of empathy, you'd understand why this is important to me. Empathy? I said, incredulous. Empathy doesn't mean sacrificing your own family for someone else's. You're so busy saving Adrian that you're losing us in the process. Do you even see that? The fight spiraled from there, each of us throwing accusations and frustrations into the air like sparks from a fire. Finally, Sophia said something that felt like a dagger to my chest. Maybe you're just jealous, Elliot, she said, her voice cutting. Jealous that I care about someone else's needs for once instead of yours. I stared at her, stunned. Jealous, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. This isn't about jealousy, Sophia. This is about respect. Respect for me, for our marriage, and for the family we've built. She didn't respond, just stood there with her arms crossed, her jaw set. Fine, I said after a long, tense silence. If that's how you see it, there's nothing more to say. I turned and walked out of the room, my chest tight with anger and hurt. That night, I slept in the guest room, unable to bring myself to share a bed with someone who seemed so far away from me. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of the end for us. I loved Sophia, but love alone wasn't enough to hold us together. If she kept choosing someone else over her own family, something had to give, because I couldn't keep living like this. Isla's 5th birthday was supposed to be a joyous occasion. I had planned everything to make it special for her. Her favorite cake, a small party with close friends and family, and balloons in every shade of pink and purple. But the day took a turn I hadn't anticipated. She woke up pale and lethargic, her small frame trembling with fever. I could tell something was seriously wrong. I tried calling Sophia, hoping she could come home and help, but she didn't answer. Of course, she was at the hospital again. Couldn't wait. I scooped Isla into my arms and rushed her to the emergency room. As I sat in the waiting area, holding my daughter close, I finally got through to Sophia. Sophia, I said, my voice tight with urgency. I'm at the hospital with Isla. She's... Before I could finish, she interrupted. Oh good, you're already there. Can you stop by the cafeteria and grab some food for 3 people? Adrian, his son, and I haven't eaten all day. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. What? I asked, stunned. Just bring some sandwiches or something? She said casually, as if I hadn't just told her I was at the hospital with our daughter. I felt the anger boil up in me, quick and unrelenting. Sophia? I said, my voice cold and sharp. Do you even care why I'm here? There was a pause. Then she replied, Elliot, I'm really busy. Can we talk later? I didn't answer. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling with fury. My daughter, our daughter, was sick, and all Sophia could think about was feeding Adrian and his son. It was like I didn't even recognize the woman I had married anymore. The doctor came in shortly after, his expression grave. My heart sank. "Mr. Thompson," he began. "Your daughter's condition is serious. Her kidneys are failing. We need to start dialysis immediately, and she'll require a transplant as soon as possible." The words hit me like a freight train. I felt the room spin, my breath catching in my throat. My sweet, innocent Isla. How could this be happening? I held her tiny hand as she lay on the hospital bed, her face pale but peaceful. My mind raced, 1,000 thoughts colliding at once. I needed to stay strong for her, to be the parent she needed, especially since Sophia wasn't there. I wanted to call Sophia again to tell her what was happening, but my anger held me back. If she couldn't prioritize her own daughter over someone else's family, what was the point? As the nurses prepped Isla for dialysis, I silently vowed to do whatever it took to save her. She was my whole world, and I couldn't fail her, even if it meant doing it without Sophia. Sitting in the hospital room, watching Isla's frail body hooked up to machines, I felt a helplessness I had never known before. My daughter, my vibrant, joyful little girl, was now fighting for her life. It was a bitter reality to face, and every second stretched into an eternity as I waited for Sophia to call back, hoping she'd finally understand the gravity of the situation. When my phone buzzed, I answered immediately, expecting concern, maybe even panic. Instead, Sophia's voice exploded through the line. "How could you do that, Elliot?" she shouted. "You humiliated me. Adrian and his son were waiting for food, and you just ignored them. What kind of person does that?" Her words were like gasoline on an already raging fire. My jaw clenched, and I gripped the phone tightly, trying to keep my composure. "Sophia," I began, my voice low and trembling with anger. "Do you even know what's happening right now? Do you care?" "You're the one who doesn't care," she screamed back. "You're selfish, Elliot. Always thinking about yourself." Something inside me snapped. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the sterile floor. My hand tightened into a fist, and for a fleeting moment, I felt the urge to lash out, but I stopped myself. Taking a deep breath, I forced my voice to stay steady, though every word came out like a growl. "Our daughter," I said through gritted teeth, "is in the ICU. Her kidneys are failing. She might not make it unless she gets a transplant. And while I'm here trying to hold it together for her, you're worried about feeding Adrian and his son." There was silence on the other end just for a moment. Then Sophia's voice returned, sharp and louder. "How could you let it get this bad?" she demanded. "You're her father, Elliot. You should have noticed sooner. This is your fault." I stared at the wall, my vision blurring with tears of frustration and exhaustion. "Sophia," I said quietly, my voice breaking, "you weren't even there. Don't you dare blame me for this." The argument grew louder, each of us hurling accusations like daggers, our voices echoing through the phone until I finally hung up, unable to bear another word. The room fell silent, save for the steady beeping of the machines keeping Isla stable. I sat beside her bed, my head in my hands, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of everything happening. My little girl was fighting for her life, and the person who should have been by my side was nowhere to be found. The door opened, and a nurse entered, gently reminding me that Isla needed rest. I nodded absently, unable to move from her bedside. My thoughts churned in a storm of anger, sorrow, and helplessness. How could Sophia be so blind to what mattered most? How had we come to this point? The next day brought no relief. The doctors were clear Isla needed a transplant soon, or her chances of survival would diminish drastically. Her rare blood type made finding a donor even harder. Desperation began to set in, and I found myself considering options I never thought I'd have to face. I called Sophia again, hoping she might finally understand the gravity of the situation. She answered, her tone as detached as ever. "What now, Elliot?" she asked, irritation lacing her words. "They need to test your blood," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "You might be a match for Isla." There was a long pause, and then Sophia sighed. "I'll see if I can find time." "Find time," I repeated, disbelief coursing through me. "This is your daughter, Sophia. She doesn't have time for you to find time." She didn't answer, and I hung up, the disappointment and rage consuming me. That evening, my father, Alexander, arrived at the hospital. His presence brought a sense of steadiness I desperately needed. He was a man who rarely showed emotion, but as he stood by Isla's bedside, I saw the concern etched into his features. "How's she holding up?" he asked, his voice low and steady. I shook my head, unable to find the words. "They're still looking for a donor," I finally managed. "Sophia. She hasn't even been tested yet." Alexander's expression darkened. "This situation can't continue, Elliot. If Sophia won't step up, you need to." "I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just don't know what to do anymore." Alexander placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "You do whatever it takes to save your daughter. No one else matters." His words struck a chord deep within me. That night, as I sat beside Isla, I made a decision. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Gabriel," I said when he answered. "It's me. I need surveillance on Sophia and Adrian. I want to know everything, where they go, who they meet, what they do. No stone unturned." "Understood," Gabriel replied without hesitation. "You'll have a full report soon." Hanging up, I turned back to Isla. Her small, fragile body seemed even smaller under the weight of the situation. The anger and betrayal I felt toward Sophia only fueled my determination. If she wouldn't fight for our daughter, I would. I'd fight with everything I had. 2 days later, Gabriel called me back. "You're not going to like this," he began, his voice cautious. "Just tell me," I said, my grip tightening on the phone. "Sophia has been spending a lot of time with Adrian. Too much time. And she's using your money to fund his lifestyle. Private school tuition for his son, mortgage payments for his house, even a car. She's funneling it all from your joint accounts." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Anything else?" I asked, my voice tight. "Yeah," Gabriel said after a pause. "Adrian's wife didn't die in an accident like you were told. There's evidence suggesting foul play, and Sophia knows more than she's letting on." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. My wife, the woman I had trusted, loved, and built a life with, was not just betraying me but was complicit in something far darker than I had imagined. My mind raced, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. "Keep digging," I said, my voice cold. "I want everything." As I hung up, I felt a renewed sense of resolve. Sophia and Adrian thought they had control, thought they could manipulate me and use Isla's life as leverage. But they underestimated me. They had no idea who they were dealing with. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The days that followed were a blur of planning and controlled fury. Isla's condition was stable for the moment, but time was running out. The doctors reiterated that a transplant was critical, and each passing hour felt like another weight added to the crushing load I carried. Meanwhile, Gabriel's updates painted a picture of a betrayal so deep that it solidified my resolve. Sophia and Adrian had crossed a line from which there was no return. Gabriel's investigation uncovered damning evidence. Bank transfers, messages, and surveillance footage that confirmed Sophia's duplicity. She wasn't just supporting Adrian. She was deeply entangled in his life, prioritizing him and his son over her own family. Worse, there was enough evidence to suggest Sophia had knowingly aided Adrian in covering up his wife's suspicious death. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was criminal. It was time to act. The next morning, I called Sophia. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I'm at the hospital," she replied, her voice brisk. "Can it wait?" "No," I said firmly. "It's about Isla." That got her attention. She agreed to meet me later that evening at our home. I hung up, feeling the weight of what was to come. I didn't feel anger anymore. It had been replaced by something colder, more calculated. When Sophia arrived, I was waiting for her in the living room. Gabriel stood silently in the shadows, a file in hand. Sophia looked surprised to see him. "What's going on, Elliot?" she asked, her tone guarded. "Sit down," I said, motioning to the chair across from me. She hesitated but complied. Gabriel stepped forward, placing the file on the table between us. "What is this?" Sophia asked, her voice faltering slightly. "Evidence," I said, leaning back in my chair, "of everything you've been doing behind my back. The money you've siphoned from our accounts, your involvement with Adrian, and your role in covering up his wife's death." Her face paled, but she quickly recovered, her expression hardening. "You've been spying on me?" she said, her voice sharp. "Don't try to turn this around," I said coldly. "You've betrayed me, betrayed Isla, and abandoned your family for a man who's using you. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Sophia opened her mouth to speak, but Gabriel interrupted, his tone calm but firm. "Mrs. Thompson, we have enough evidence to take this to the authorities. Adrian is under investigation for his wife's death, and you've made yourself an accessory." Her composure cracked. "You can't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "Elliot, think about Isla." "I am thinking about Isla," I said, my voice icy. "That's why you'll sign over full custody to me and disappear from our lives. If you don't, I'll make sure you and Adrian both face charges for what you've done." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't take Isla from me. You already did that yourself," I said, standing. "When you abandoned her, when you chose Adrian over your family, when you gave away her chance at survival for his son." Sophia's shoulders slumped, her defiance crumbling under the weight of the truth. Gabriel slid a stack of papers across the table, a custody agreement and a waiver relinquishing any claim to my assets. "Sign these," he said simply, "or face the consequences." Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen. Tears streamed down her face as she scribbled her signature on each page. When she was done, she dropped the pen and looked up at me, her expression a mix of anger and despair. "I loved you," she said quietly. "I hope you know that." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You loved control, and now you've lost it." Sophia stood and walked toward the door, her steps unsteady. She paused briefly before leaving, as if waiting for me to stop her. I didn't. The door closed behind her, and the silence that followed was deafening. The next day, I sat by Isla's bedside as the doctors prepared for her transplant. Sophia had finally agreed to the surgery, her last act of decency before leaving our lives for good. The operation was a success, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. Isla woke up a few days later, her small, pale face lighting up with a weak smile when she saw me. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm here, sweetheart," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I'll always be here." Sophia's absence left a void, but it was one I could live with. Isla was safe, and that was all that mattered. Adrian's arrest came shortly after, and with Gabriel's help, I ensured that Sophia's involvement in his schemes was quietly buried, for Isla's sake if nothing else. Our lives were far from perfect, but as I held my daughter's hand and watched her recover, I knew we had a future. One free of lies, betrayal, and darkness. For Isla I had fought, and for Isla I had won. Weeks passed, and Isla's recovery progressed steadily. The hospital room, once filled with fear and despair, now carried an air of hope. Each day, I saw her strength returning, her laughter slowly replacing the silence. It was a reminder of why I had fought so hard, why I had made choices that would haunt me forever. Sophia was gone, her absence a quiet echo in our lives. There were no attempts to reach out, no late-night calls, no requests to see Isla. It was as if she had vanished entirely, leaving behind only the remnants of what we once had. Gabriel ensured that she stayed far away, monitoring her movements discreetly to prevent any surprises. Adrian, meanwhile, faced the full weight of the law. The investigation into his wife's death led to his arrest, and the evidence Gabriel gathered sealed his fate. The media frenzy that followed painted him as a calculating manipulator, a man willing to destroy lives for his own gain. For me, the world became simpler. My focus narrowed to Isla and the business I had neglected during the chaos. With my father's guidance, I restructured everything, streamlining operations to give me more time with Isla. The empire I had inherited would remain strong, but it no longer defined me. Isla did. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across our backyard, I sat with Isla on the porch. She was curled up beside me, her head resting on my chest as we watched the fireflies dance in the fading light. "Daddy?" she said softly, her voice carrying the innocence only a child could possess. "Yes, sweetheart. Why doesn't Mommy come anymore?" Her question was simple, but it carried a weight that tightened my chest. I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Sometimes," I began, "people make choices that take them far away from the people they love. But it doesn't mean they don't care. It just means they're lost." "Will she come back?" Isla asked, her wide eyes searching mine. I hesitated, knowing the truth would be difficult for her to understand. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But what I do know is that I'll always be here for you, no matter what." She seemed to accept that, her small hand reaching up to hold mine. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Isla. More than anything in the world." Months turned into years. The scars left by Sophia and Adrian faded, though they never disappeared entirely. Isla thrived, her resilience and joy bringing light back into my life. She grew stronger every day, her laughter filling our home with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Sophia remained a ghost of the past. Occasionally, I wondered where she was, what she was doing, and if she ever thought about the life she had left behind. But those thoughts were fleeting, replaced by the present, the life I was building with Isla. One day, I received a letter from Sophia. It was brief, almost cold, as if she hadn't known how to put her emotions into words. "Elliot, I hope Isla is well. I don't expect forgiveness or understanding, but I needed to say this. I'm sorry. For everything. I made mistakes I can't undo, choices that hurt the people I love the most. I thought I was doing what was right, but I was wrong. I hope one day Isla can understand, even if she never forgives me. Sophia." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, unsure of how to feel. There was no closure in her words, only a reminder of the pain she had caused. But as I looked at Isla playing in the yard, her laughter ringing out like music, I knew that the past no longer defined us. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own set of challenges and triumphs. Isla grew into a bright and curious young girl, her resilience a testament to the strength she had inherited. Watching her thrive filled my heart with pride and gratitude, but the scars of the past still lingered in the quieter moments of my life. Sophia's absence became a permanent part of our reality. I never spoke ill of her to Isla, choosing instead to let time and distance soften the edges of her memory. For Isla, the question of her mother became less frequent, replaced by her excitement for school, friends, and the adventures of childhood. My focus was on being the father she deserved, present, loving, and unwavering. One evening, after a long day at the office, I found myself sitting in my study, sifting through old documents. Among the papers was Sophia's letter, still tucked away in the drawer where I had placed it years ago. The words, though simple, carried a weight that was hard to ignore. As I reread the letter, a thought struck me closure. Not for Sophia, not for the woman who had abandoned her family, but for myself. There was a part of me that still carried the anger, the betrayal, the unanswered questions. If I were to move forward completely, perhaps it was time to address the shadows of the past. I reached out to Gabriel. "I need to know," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Know what?" he asked. "Where she is. What she's been doing. I need the whole story." Gabriel didn't question my decision. Within days, he provided me with a comprehensive report. Sophia was living in a small town in northern Colorado, far from the life we had once shared. She worked at a modest clinic treating low-income patients. There was no sign of Adrian. His imprisonment had severed whatever connection they once had. Sophia seemed to live a quiet, isolated life, her world reduced to her work and solitude. I debated whether to reach out, whether seeing her again would bring clarity or just reopen old wounds. In the end, I decided to leave it be. Sophia had made her choices and I had made mine. Isla and I had found peace in our new life, and I wouldn't risk that for the sake of a past I had worked so hard to leave behind. As Isla's 10th birthday approached, I threw myself into planning a celebration that would reflect how far we had come. Friends, family, and neighbors gathered in our backyard, the space alive with laughter and joy. Isla beamed as she blew out the candles on her cake, her face radiant with happiness. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me with a seriousness that was rare for her. "Daddy," she said, her voice soft, "I'm really happy." Her words hit me like a warm embrace, filling me with a sense of fulfillment I hadn't felt in years. "I'm happy too, sweetheart," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're my whole world." She smiled, her eyes fluttering shut as sleep claimed her. In the quiet of the evening, I sat on the porch, gazing up at the stars. The journey had been long and painful, but it had also been transformative. I had lost much, but I had gained something far more valuable: a life filled with love, hope, and the bond one shared with my daughter. Sophia's memory no longer haunted me. She had become a figure of the past, her presence fading into the background of a life I no longer lived. My focus was forward, on Isla, on the future we were building together. For the first time in years I felt free. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. That's the story. What are your thoughts? Comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.